Most people imagine money printing as giant machines spitting out stacks of cash, the government just hitting print whenever it needs more. But the truth is, almost all money today is created without a physical printer. It's mostly numbers on a screen, digital entries. So if no one is actually printing stacks of cash, how does new money appear in the system? Where does it come from? Governments usually rely on two major methods to create money: debt monetization and quantitative easing. And no, you're not expected to know what those terms mean. Economists sometimes use complicated language to sound smarter than they really are. So let's break it down in plain English. Debt monetization is basically the process of turning government IOUs into real money. Imagine the government as someone with a pretty serious spending problem, and imagine the central bank as the one friend who has access to an unlimited digital money printer. The government wants to spend more than it earns, so it creates debt. It issues bonds. These are like certificates that say, "I'll pay you back later, trust me." The central bank then steps in, buys that debt, and pays for it using newly created digital money. As soon as the central bank buys those bonds, that money enters the system. It's brand new. It didn't exist yesterday. It was typed into existence. So the government gets the money it wants, the central bank gets the debt, and the total amount of money floating around in the economy grows. And if you're wondering how much the government owes after doing this over and over again, well, in the US case, it's around $29 trillion. And yes, the government keeps saying it will pay it back someday. And no, there isn't really a plan that makes anyone feel confident. But the system keeps going because the central bank's job is to maintain economic stability and growth. As long as the economy expands, the central bank can act like everything is fine. But even they know nothing can grow forever. At some point, you can't keep inflating numbers and calling it growth. Yet the illusion continues because injecting new money into the system makes the economy look like it's growing, at least for a while. That's the essence of debt monetization. The government spends, issues debt, and the central bank buys that debt using newly created money. Now let's move to the other powerful tool: quantitative easing. The name sounds technical, but it's simply the central bank creating money and using it to buy financial assets, usually from big banks and investment firms. Think of the financial system as a pyramid. The central bank sits at the top. Below that are commercial banks, retail banks, and investment banks. And at the bottom are regular people and businesses. In a healthy economy, money flows freely up and down this pyramid. Banks lend to each other, people borrow from banks, companies invest, consumers spend, everyone participates. But when fear takes over, like during a recession or a financial crisis, the flow slows down. People stop borrowing. They stop spending. Companies lose revenue and cut back. Banks become nervous and stop lending to one another because they fear not getting paid back. The whole system tightens up. When that blockage happens, growth freezes, and the central bank hates that. To keep things moving, it has two weapons: lowering interest rates or buying assets. When lowering interest rates isn't enough, because they're already near zero, the central bank turns to quantitative easing. It prints new digital money and uses it to buy assets from financial institutions. When the central bank buys these assets, banks suddenly have more money on hand. With this fresh liquidity, the banks can lend more cheaply and more often, which encourages businesses and consumers to spend again. That activity restarts the flow, at least temporarily. But here's the interesting part. Even though the central bank is literally creating new money, they don't want to call it money printing. Because historically, money printing is the last desperate move collapsing empires use when their economic systems are falling apart. So instead, they use complex terms that sound more controlled: quantitative easing, liquidity injection, asset purchase programs. But the mechanism is the same. Money is created digitally and injected into the system to stimulate growth. All financial systems that rely heavily on artificial money creation eventually run into the same problem. Unintended consequences. You can't keep adding more and more money into a system without changing how that system behaves. The first major consequence is that the national debt grows to levels that become almost impossible to manage. Pushing today's problems into the future eventually means the future has to deal with a much bigger mess. The second consequence is inflation. When more money enters the system without an equivalent increase in goods and services, prices rise. Your money buys less, your savings lose value. Everyday people feel the pain long before anyone in government admits something's wrong. And while the central bank can argue that inflation is manageable or temporary, history shows what happens when money creation becomes the default solution instead of the last resort. Eventually, the system becomes distorted. Assets inflate, wealth gaps widen, and the economy depends more and more on artificial support. But here's the thing. Without these tools, debt monetization and quantitative easing, the economy would likely stall, crash, or fall into severe recession. So the central bank continues doing what it knows how to do. Print money digitally and buy debt. It keeps the machine running, but the long-term costs grow bigger each time. And that's the world we're living in. A financial system that functions, but only because it's constantly propped up by new money. A system that grows, but only because the central bank keeps inflating it. A system that looks stable, but only because the problems are pushed farther into the future. Thanks for watching InvestingFlix, where smart money learns smarter moves. Subscribe for more insights that grow your wealth.